Hello, my name is Ameenah. This is my daughter, Alora. She was born January 17th, 2023, and this is my story. May of last year, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was just very depressed and sad because I had made so many plans for the summer, and I just wanted to travel and be more active. And I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, so I found the women's clinic around my house, and I chose First Care because it had the best ratings. So I came in, and with my mind already made up to not choose life and abort my child, Mary helped me choose life. She changed my mind and let me know that I wasn't alone and God had me and He would take care of me and my family. So when I left, I was happy. They told me to come back and they'll show me my little baby and listen to the heartbeat. I got little photos on my next visit, so I was like, I got this. So throughout my journey, I kept First Care Women Clinic as my best friend. They helped me out with a lot of things for my baby. It was a gift. I'm very appreciative of First Care Women's Clinic. I love being a boy and a girl mom. I have the best of both worlds. They're not too far apart. And my son won't be the only child, He'll have a lifelong friend, so I made a decision to continue to go through school so I could get me a degree in criminal justice and be a future defense attorney. And Mary actually helped me with the type of attorney I wanted to become. Because I told her I wanted to be a lawyer, and she was like, you're going to be a defense attorney. So, yeah. I love it here.
The Supreme Court has essentially reshaped American life.
It's going to be legal chaos.
Where abortion is legal in about half the states, illegal in half the states.
Even though America was braced for the decision, it was nonetheless momentous. In a divided America, there was unbridled joy and resolute anger.
And I am absolutely terrified. I'm so beyond livid at what is going on, and I'm going to turn my fear into anger.
Welcome to the First Care Women's Clinic Banquet. My name is Jay Watts. I am the current chairperson of the board of directors for First Care Women's Clinic. I also have the opportunity I run an organization called Merely Human Ministries, where I travel around the United States and talk about things like what we're here for tonight. About a year ago, almost a year ago, I was actually at an event in Kentucky, much like this, where I was speaking to a group of people, much like you, a room about this size. A lot of people in the room were representatives in the state house or in the Senate for the state of Kentucky, and we were on the verge of what you just saw there, the end of Roe. And as we were talking about it, and the questions were coming from the audience about what does this mean? What is about to happen? What are we about to see in our country? One of the things that we talked about that night was that we had spent the last 50 years fighting for the right to fight. For 50 years, we weren't allowed to have meaningful conversations with our neighbors that could impact our communities. For 50 years, this country was held hostage by a court decision that said that nowhere in the country could the moral commitments of that community outlaw or in any way restrict the practice of abortion. I said, we have spent 50 years fighting for the right to fight in our communities, and we're about to have it. And now we do. And the last year has been very instructive for us all about how hard the other side is willing to fight to continue to have access to abortion all across the United States. And it has been a mixed bag of goods because we have this monumental victory And then since then, there's been tremendous pushbacks, and we've had losses in states we didn't expect to lose in. But one of the things that's most exciting to me is that the local efforts, like what you're involved with tonight, the local opportunity to come together to impact your community has never been more powerful in the last 50 years than it is today. We actually can change our communities now. We can actually convince our neighbors of the wrongness of abortion, have meaningful conversation with the people in our lives, find ways to serve our community to make it so it's not necessary to reach into and one of the things that was most telling to me about what that video that you just watched was that one young lady, and what did she say? She's so afraid. And she wants to turn that fear into anger. Let me tell you something from just my own experiences around the country recently and from many of my friends that I talk to. The other side has been trading in fear with as much impact and effect as they can since the fall of Roe v. Wade last year. They have generated as much fear and anxiety and emotion and hatred as they possibly can. And what makes what we're gathered here tonight to do so important is that we are going to answer that fear with the love of our community in a Christ-like way that reaches into the lives of people that are afraid and gives them more life-affirming options. Tonight is not just about celebrating this ministry, it's about supporting this ministry. And so I pray as we get ready for this evening, as we prepare ourselves to receive the messages from the different people involved in this organization and from our great speaker, Eric Metaxas, I pray that we prepare ourselves, ready ourselves to seek God and what he would have us do to support First Care Women's Clinic, because it has never been more important. The effort that we're involved in has never been more important, and it has never had the ability to impact our community that it has today. And that leads me to one of the great pleasures that I'll have tonight is to introduce my dear friend, Lori Parker. I was just telling some of the people that we're sitting at the table with, and I was telling people earlier, earlier we were having a conversation with somebody, and I said, I started here in the pro-life movement. My beginning in the pro-life movement actually was because I came to her and I asked her to volunteer in this organization. And after we talked for an hour, I knew two things. Number one, that I had met somebody whose heart for God was so powerful on this issue that I wanted to work alongside her. And I knew it was what God wanted me to do, and I knew that she was going to do powerful things, and we've all been blessed to watch her grow this ministry. And so, as executive director, I have never met one anywhere in the United States that I have more confidence in and that I have seen God work through more powerfully than my friend, Lori Parker. Please come.
I love him. I just love him. Yeah, I remember several years, oh gosh, when was that, Jay? About 2007? Yeah, he was coming with Johnson Ferry to do some work, and he came up to me and he said, I really love pro-life ministry. I'd love to talk to you about that. And God just spoke to me and I said, do you want a job? And he goes, I don't know, but God had plans. And so he was with us until he's moved on to much bigger things. He's he's a founder of a ministry called Merely Human, and he is a pro-life apologist. He's one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. He does a podcast, and we have a podcast room in the back of the building, second building, and he does a podcast there. And I love to listen to his intelligence, talking with people of similar intelligence. And you want to act like you're as intelligent as they are, but usually they'll say something like, well, have you read the writings of, and as soon as they say that, I go, I probably hadn't read the writings of that person, but he is very smart. So is our speaker, Eric Metaxas. Eric Metaxas is my favorite speaker. He's one of my favorite authors. He tells it like it is. Some people don't always agree with everything, but you got to say he's a gutsy guy, and I'm so thankful there are men like him who really tells things like it is. I just want to welcome all of you. This is such a beautiful sight to see all of you here. These tables filled. Everybody that serves at First Care Women's Clinic, when they love this ministry, we love this ministry so much. We know what God is doing in it. We see it every day. And then we look in this crowd of people that are supporting it, and it's so encouraging. As a matter of fact, it encourages us really throughout the year. We just remember we're not alone, and we're so grateful for that. So just talking about a little bit about what's happening, you know, one thing that happened was Roe v. Wade was overturned. That happened. I know, that was amazing. Well, actually, to tell you the truth, I knew it was going to happen. If a case ever got to the Supreme Court, there was no way that Roe v. Wade was going to hold. And you know, the abortion industry knew that too. So did all the pro-abortion people. They all knew that. That's why there were trigger laws in states to get ready for that should it happen. But then when it happens, what do? Oh my, can you believe they did this? This is horrible. And yet they knew that Roe v. Wade was a bad law, and it was a bad law. So they went after two things, the Supreme Court, saying the Supreme Court did not do their job. They did exactly their job. They followed the Constitution. And then they went after the pregnancy center. And you heard about the bombings and the threats, and they would go and tear up the buildings and things like that. But I think the biggest thing that they have done is try to discredit us. And they really try to make people think that we're this horrible group of people. But I believe that truth prevails, and we still see so many women in crisis, and it's making no difference. They can attack all they want. We're standing. You know, if it wasn't for, thank you. Roe v. Wade was great, and I'm glad, because what it did was it made the way for states to be able to dictate their own laws about abortion. We were so blessed in Georgia to have the heartbeat bill. It had already passed, and it was just caught in the courts. And I got to tell you, at the time, the state representative, who is now the state senator, Ed Setzler, is with us tonight, and he was one of the main author of that bill. Ed, can you stand up? Where is he? Yes. I can call him a friend, but I was telling him today, because I started to say something, I said, state representative, I said, oh, your title changed. He goes, yeah, I have trouble with it myself. But there is a person I would love to shake his hand. I've never met him before, Chris Carr. He's our Attorney General. He got the heartbeat out of the law, out of the courts so fast. And he said, it's effective immediately. And I remembered the day that they announced it. We had an abortion-minded woman that was coming in a couple of hours, and I was worried about I thought, is she going to know? Because, you know, it just happened. I just heard about it. But a lot of times the women we see, they've got a lot of problems and issues, and they're not as aware of what's going on in the world sometimes, or I assume that. But also, you know, I just wondered how she was going to react. Was she going to come in, she was going to be really mad? Was she just not going to show? I mean, who knew? But she walked in, and she knew. And she said, okay, I understand that the law in Georgia has changed, and I need to have an ultrasound to see if I can have this abortion. And so we do what we normally do. We take them through, they go and get a pregnancy test, and we take them through a counseling area where we find out what's going on in their lives, what struggles are they having, why are they considering abortion, talk to them about options, give them resources and hope and love on them, and share Jesus with them. And then we took her back into the ultrasound room. And on the screen is an image of this precious, precious baby with a little heart just beating. And the mother looked at the image and she says, well, looks like I'm going to have a baby. And what was so wonderful about that was I thought, she's not mad. I mean, there were protesters everywhere. People were screaming, not around us, but you saw it on the news. People screaming. And this woman who was in desperate situations that just had found out she could not have an abortion was calm. And you know, I thought to myself, well, this just got announced and there's already a baby saved. We've been doing the ultrasounds to determine if the heart is beating for so many abortion-minded women since, because we want them to come through our doors. We want them to meet with us, because if they go somewhere else, they're going to hear a totally different message. And what's interesting is 87% of the women who actually don't see a heartbeat on the ultrasound still choose life. because they came to us. And that's the ones that we can confirm. And those are people who could have an abortion. I was reading something with Georgia Life Alliance, and they were saying that over 10,000 babies have been saved. Did you see that with Georgia Life Alliance? Over 10,000 babies will live to see their first birthday because of the heartbeat bill. And that means so much. There's abortionists who do a visual clinic, where they meet with women on, like a visual, like a Zoom, and then they prescribe the abortion pill and they send it to them. And they said, they reported that there's a 98% decrease in the number of women from Georgia who are asking for the abortion pill, while other states are climbing. That's what's so incredible. So the thing is, to me, is like the women that we're seeing, they're not angry. None of them have been angry. Some of them were still wanting abortions, but they're not angry that the laws have changed. So just know that the voices that you're hearing that are so loud are not always the voices of the majority. And one thing that they do have in common, though, is they're in trouble. So we have got to be able to help these women in a way that is really going to make a difference in their lives. Because if you cannot tell a woman she can't abort and then not help her. So on your tables, there's this little booklet called Creating a Culture for Life. And it is, we've already known that Roe v. Wade was going to be overturned at some point, and we already knew the heartbeat bill had passed, and so I'd already started planning what we needed to do to meet the needs of that woman now. And one of the things is we want the church to be much more involved because we have got to help her deeper. The thing that I love about the fact that the heartbeat bill does is it does allow us to go deeper into that woman's life, because if abortion's not an option, she's much more receptive to other options, more receptive to adoption, more receptive to getting the support she needs to be able to parent her child. So that's where we're focusing, and we want the church to be more involved. And one of the ways that you can be involved is to financially support us. So this fundraiser tonight is to raise money not just to help us operate. I think this is probably, to me, the most important fundraiser we've ever had, because we've got to support these women more. When you're trying to tell a woman how to live and she's sitting there wondering if the electricity is going to be on when she gets home, when you're telling her she should have that baby and she's thinking, I got 2 children at home and I can't even afford childcare, how am I supposed to do that? It's easy for you to say, we've got to help her. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to state legislators about, and I did talk to Ed Sessler about it, is we have got to make it easier for churches to open their doors and provide free health care, child care for these moms to help them go to work. But what we want from, and when I say the church, I'm not just talking about the institution, I'm talking about the people. We want people to be more personally and intimately involved in the lives of these women. And then we want them to come into your churches, and we want them to come to know Jesus, because you know at the core of the abortion battle is their need for Jesus Christ, for sure. So we are very much wanting to really aggressively be able to financially provide assistance to these women. We already do that to the best of our ability. But let me explain something to you. We see thousands of women a year, thousands and thousands, and 99% of them are in trouble because they're of finances. Finances could fix it. And when you say to a woman, why are you considering abortion? And she tells you, and you go, well, if that wasn't a problem, would you abort? And she says, no, then we got to do something about that. So your giving tonight is going to be like handing a woman. And we've got a lot of testimonies going to show tonight. And it's just like, look at those women, hear them. They represent all the women that we see. It's like you're handing them hope. So I ask you to give big, and not just once, but I want you to continue to support us, because we are going to meet the needs of these women. God has given us a great gift. And one of the other things we want to do is we want to really help them stabilize their lives. We already provide classes like prenatal and life skills and relationship classes. And we want to extend that. And one of the most important classes to me are abortion recovery classes, because a lot of the women that we see have had abortions before or considering it again. A woman who's had an abortion is much more likely to have another abortion. So I want to just show you what it's like for a woman, whether she knows Christ or not, to deal with the pain of abortion. Listen to Mimi's story.
My name is Mimi. I have 2 children. One is Brilliance and the other is Zion. I've had 2 abortions, and I want to tell you about the first one. Several years ago, I just recently overcome being homeless, and I had a boyfriend. I actually didn't know I was pregnant. He was the one to tell me, and the first thing I thought was, how am I going to be able to do this? I was scared. I didn't really have any family to help me. I was pretty much by myself, just me and my ex-boyfriend at the time. We had a conversation one day about me being pregnant, and I told him I was scared and I was considering having an abortion. He told me that the decision was up to me, and I said okay. But I expressed to him that if he was to say, no, let's not have abortion, that I was going to have the baby. But he just kept repeating that the decision was up to me. And so I said, okay. Later that evening, he physically assaulted me. And I knew right then and there that it was no other decision other than to have abortion. A few days later, I scheduled the abortion, and I asked him to take me to the appointment to get it done. Going into the room to actually get the procedure, I was terrified. I immediately started crying. I started praying to God and just asking him to forgive me. And it was so bad to the point where one of the nurses actually had to come in and hold me and wipe my tears and pray with me. And she was just saying everything's gonna be okay, but it wasn't. It wasn't. That started my depression. After that procedure, when I got home, he texted me and said we shouldn't have did that. Yeah. I came to First Care Women's Clinic to confirm my pregnancy for my daughter, Brilliance. And when I came here, I was given a pamphlet with different classes that they offered. And one of the classes that I saw was the abortion recovery. And I was interested in it because I still struggle with things from having 2 abortions. So I said, you know what, let me just check it out. As I started taking the classes, I felt very comfortable talking to the small group that we had. It was very refreshing hearing a lot of the women's experience, knowing that I was not alone. A lot of the things that I was feeling, a lot of other women felt too, and they didn't feel comfortable really speaking about these experiences. We had a safe place to talk, to heal, to really overcome this thing that's taken over us. I really feel like every woman should take this class if you've had an abortion. It's very refreshing and that healing. I didn't really think that I was going to heal from having 2 abortions. Lindsay helped me. This class helped me. If there is any woman who is considering having an abortion, I would absolutely tell them to go to First Care Women's Clinic. Let them help you. Honestly, that was some of the best things I did was come to First Care Women's Clinic to get help. So thank you so much for helping me.
I want to tell you what success is. Success is that Mimi is now a Christian. She's married. She has children. that she's concerned about because her and her husband own a cookie company and she doesn't like to leave her kids. And their cookie company is called Sugar Daddies, and it's at Lenox. And all the hosts, if you'll do me a favor and get that box, I want everyone at your table to have a cookie from Sugar Daddies. And Mimi, are you here? Where are you? Yes. I want everybody to remember the company Sugar Daddies if you need some cookies, and we all need cookies. So just remember them, because this is what we want to see. This is what happens when lives are changed, and that's what we want to see. My perspective has changed completely about the abortion battle since I started serving at First Care Women's Clinic a long time ago. And before I got involved in pro-life ministry, I believed that abortion was terrible. I believed that it was wrong of women to do it. They should be told, and it was all about the baby. But as I started to spend time over the years, one after another, with these lovely, beautiful, smart, educated, strong, powerful, lovely women that wanted to have an abortion, I realized it's not about feminism. It is about just being in trouble. So we are a place, if you've ever wanted to help families, we're a place where these women can go and get help and change their lives. Women like Mimi. So please just know that this fundraiser right now will help women like her. Also, the pro-abortion groups are trying to discredit us, but I'm going to tell you something. This thing I do know for a fact. It does not matter if we are Christian or pro-life if we help women. And the reason that we've been attacked so aggressively is because we threaten the abortion industry. We are strong. We are influencing women in a major way for life, and we are the ones that help women, not them. But I want to share one thing with you too. This is a lost world, and we have got to pray for those who come against us because they're lost. And the one thing that I love about First Care Women's Clinic is we share the gospel with everyone. It is the hope. And if we can get these women and these men into the church, and we could see these families saved, it's all about the family saved, we can transform this world. I truly believe we can. So I want to thank you for being here, and I just want to pray that you enjoy the rest of the evening, and just know that Eric Metaxas is just amazingly good. And I'm just delighted to be able to have him here. Love you very much. If you've never gone to take a tour at the center, just call me. I'd love to take you on a tour, to have lunch for you. I want you to get closer to it. It is time. One of the things about God's people is we've got to get closer. We've got to not just know each other with a financial check. Invest in that. Come and get to know us. We love to show you every day. I tell you, we just love it when people come in and just say, I just want to see. We work and partner so well with 40 Days for Life, which is right down, we have a Planned Parenthood right down the road from us. And we are the 4th highest county for resident abortions in the state of Georgia out of 159. So if you live in Cobb, if you work in Cobb, if you serve in Cobb, if your church is in Cobb, you have an obligation. These are your neighbors. These are your neighbors. This is the area that God has given you to influence. We also are in this front line of the abortion battle. Out of 159 counties, over a half of all the women, residents of Georgia who abort each year live in the 4 counties of Fulton, DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Cobb. And with a Planned Parenthood that does medication abortions, which is now the abortion preference for women, we can fight. I don't believe God gave us this wonderful gift of the overturning of Roe v. Wade to fail. It is up to us, though, to take it up and move forward. Don't be afraid of the enemy, because as I said before, they're louder than they are in number. God bless you. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
The first time that I came to the clinic, I had just discovered that I was pregnant and I needed some guidance. I wasn't really sure of where I needed to go and what I needed to do. But some great people that I'm friends with referred me to this clinic and told me that they would provide me with the things that I needed to be, that I needed in order to be able to move forward in my pregnancy. My experience with the clinic was amazing. All the way down from Lori to Kristen, everyone on staff was amazing. They helped me. They called, they checked on me, they guided me throughout my entire pregnancy. They were always a phone call away. They were good about reaching out to me, calling me back. Their service was just amazing. They really made me feel comfortable and made me feel right at home. Some of the programs that they offer that I was involved with was a Bright course. They offer that course for moms, first-time moms such as myself, that allow you to be able to earn points in order to go and experience and buy things from their baby boutique. The baby boutique that they have offers anything from diapers to wipes to onesies, anything that a first-time mom or a mom in general would need to take care of their little ones. So they offered, they offer so many things. Anything that you can think of, they offered. So it was pretty amazing. I definitely refer anyone to come to this clinic if you're needing assistance. They also offered me assistance. I did discover a financial hardship. Also being a student in law, bills were they were still coming in each month, and I did not have the financial assistance that I needed until I spoke with Lori, and they helped me pay bills that I needed to pay in order to make sure that I kept the lights on and I didn't stress, and I am grateful for them for that. And like I said, anyone needing help, any type of assistance, talk to them. They have all kind of programs that they can offer you, and I would definitely recommend them, and I would definitely come to them again if I needed them. Thank you, First Care Women's Clinic, for being there for me and for also being there for other women. I appreciate everything that you guys have done for me, and once again, I would definitely refer any woman that's in need to this clinic. First Care Women's Clinic is definitely a 5-star clinic, and they're Christian based. I love them and I'm grateful for them, and they helped me in my transition of motherhood, and my daughter is now 4 months old as of March 3rd. So thank you, First Care Women's Clinic, for everything that you've done.
It is my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight. Eric Metaxas is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther, If You Can Keep It, Amazing Grace, love that one, Miracles, 7 Men and 7 Women, and the newly released Letter to the American Church. He is the host of the Eric Metaxas Radio Show, a 2-hour daily nationally syndicated radio program covering an intentionally wide variety of topics called The Show About Everything. Metaxas' guests have included innumerable authors, actors, musicians, athletes, scientists, comedians, political commentators, and faith leaders. In a decidedly eclectic career, Eric Metaxas had written for VeggieTales, Chuck Colson, and the New York Times. 3 things not ordinarily found in the same sentence. He is a best-selling author whose biographies, children's books, and works of popular apologetics have been translated into more than 20 languages. Eric lives in Manhattan, New York with his wife and his daughter, and let me add, as someone who got to spend a little time with him and has spent a lot of time with other speakers on the road, you know a lot about a human being by how they handle themselves as a speaker. He was generous with his time, open, happy to engage anyone and everyone that talked to him. And in every way, he communicated himself as a servant to the people in this room and seeing his job in service to the body of Christ and to our country. Let me introduce to you tonight our speaker, Eric Metaxas.
Wow, look at this crowd. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Thank you for that mostly accurate introduction. Fact is, I don't like people, but I just feel an obligation to try to be friendly. Listen, I am so grateful to the Lord that he's given me the opportunity to do many of the things that I do. I'm genuinely grateful because it wasn't always this way. Some of you, it's kind of funny. A lot of people have known me maybe since the Bonhoeffer book came out, or I spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast. And really, the Lord opened so many doors as a result of writing the Bonhoeffer book. I want to touch on that tonight. But before that, it was a huge struggle, tremendous struggle. So I really am just so grateful that you would want me to speak tonight, that you would be so gracious to me. This issue of the unborn life is extremely close to my heart. My wife, Suzanne, I think she's wife number 6. I lose track. I just want to make sure you're listening. Suzanne, she and I will be married 27, I almost said months, years, if we make it to October. I think we're going to make it. And I'm sorry she can be with me, but Suzanne, we met in church. It's a good place to meet a spouse, in case you're wondering. But it has to be the right kind of church. How many people go to a dead, useless church? Raise your hand. I'm curious. Yeah. I know some of you do, and you need to get out of those places. But I met my wife at Times Square Church. I praise the Lord for meeting Suzanne. But it was Suzanne who for 12 years ran, the Crisis Pregnancy Center, the Women's Center in New York City. And so I've been on the other side of many of these banquets. We don't have as many people in New York City who come out. So God bless you for coming out and supporting this. I should say there's so much to be said. I want to talk about my new book, Letter to the American Church, because it really focuses on what we are all talking about tonight. And what we're really talking about is, what is the role of the Church of Jesus Christ? And there are many foolish people who have a very, very narrow, even I would say secular view of what the church is. If you believe Jesus died for you and rose from the dead and is God, that should change everything in your life, not just your Sunday morning behavior, and not just, I don't do those sins now. It should change absolutely everything. And if it doesn't, either you don't know him or you have very bad theology and you're hanging out with people who have bad theology. And there are many churches in this area that have very bad theology. And let me give you a tip, because I don't have a ton of time. You know where bad theology comes from, right? Yeah, have you heard of the pit of hell? Have you heard of that? Like, bad theology is not like, oh, your theology is not bad, but you're great in other ways. Bad theology comes from the pit of hell, and it is Satan's design to get the church not to do the work of the church. And many churches will go right along with that. And if you want to know why the culture has gone to hell, which it has, it's because of the failure of the church. It's not the failure of the world. The world is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Sinners are supposed to sin. But if you've been redeemed by the blood of Jesus Christ, you're supposed to be at war with evil. You are supposed to be living your whole life knowing that you can never be defeated in the battle. That even when you die, you don't die. Do you believe that? That's what we're supposed to believe. And so something has happened. The reason I wrote the book, Letter to the American Church, because I guess I realized the parallels to what happened in the German church in the 1930s under the rise of Hitler. Those parallels are just unbelievably dramatic today in the American church. And I'm not exaggerating. I want to explain that so you know I'm not just fired up and making a mountain out of a molehill. When I wrote the Bonhoeffer book, which was in 2008, by the way, the Bonhoeffer book is my longest book. The Letter to the American Church is my shortest book. So if you buy it, you'll be able to read it very easily. But in a funny way, it's a follow-up to the Bonhoeffer book, because when I was writing the Bonhoeffer book, I remember as I'm telling the story of Bonhoeffer and the rise of the Nazis, I was kind of like smelling this in our future. I said, this is kind of eerily similar to some trends I see happening in America. I don't know what we will see in the future. I don't know where this is going to go, but I could tell at the time. Well, as the years have passed, I have been genuinely horrified to see that precisely what happened in Germany as the church was effectively silent, the same thing has happened in America. And I think you have to be clear, folks. We're talking about good people, okay? We're talking about good pastors who are silent. We're talking about good churches that get it wrong. This is not about woke, crazy churches, right? Woke, crazy churches exist. They're not the problem, okay? There were churches in Germany that were totally pro-Hitler. They weren't the problem. The problem was the vast majority of Christians who said, you know what? We don't want to be political. We don't want to take sides. We just want to preach the gospel, as if that were possible. As if it were possible you could preach whatever dead little gospel you're preaching in your church and not address the moral issues of your day. And that is the lie that had crept into the German church, and it has crept into the American church. And we have to understand how dramatic this is, how heresy proceeds millimeter by millimeter. There are going to be churches, okay, like we were talking at our table here, Ebenezer Baptist Church. The gospel of Jesus was once preached from that pulpit. Today, the man who preaches from that pulpit, I doubt he believes in the resurrection, okay? I'm pretty sure he does not. I know he loves abortion. He's preaching from a pulpit of a church. Now, I want to tell you, there's tons of churches like that, but I'm not concerned with those churches, okay? Because when somebody is ultra pro-abortion, they're apostate, they're heretical. Those places have always existed. But it is all the other churches that say, well, we don't want to decide. We don't want to be political. And that's, when I talk about Germany in the 30s, that's where it was. You had a lot of good pastors, okay? Not crazy, woke, wicked pastors who don't believe in the Nicene Creed, who don't believe in the Scripture, and they just take the title Reverend. No, I'm talking about good pastors in Germany who somehow were convinced that it's not our job to talk about that or that or that or that. We just want to preach our gospel. Want to preach the gospel. Well, I'm here in Atlanta. During slavery times, okay, there were many churches that knew slavery is an abomination, and they spoke that from the pulpit. And there were many people that said, that's not a gospel-related issue. We're not going to take a side on that. How do we judge them today? Now we know you're a coward and a liar. You got that wrong. Did you repent? If you repented, there's forgiveness. But we're not going to pretend that it was okay that you said chattel slavery is not a gospel-related issue because you don't want to offend somebody in your church. You disappointed God when you did not take sides on chattel slavery. William Wilberforce, I wrote a book called Amazing Grace about the story of William Wilberforce. He led the battle to end the slave trade in the British Empire. Why? Well, he was a member of Parliament. He was a politician. And he was born again around 1785. And he knew when he was born again, things are going to change now. When Jesus comes into the picture, it's supposed to change everything. In his life, he knew, I've got to leave politics. Politics is dirty. Well, he went to visit somebody named John Newton. Some of you know John Newton. He wrote the hymn Amazing Grace. A lot of you thought Frankie Valli wrote that, right? Yeah, that's wrong. It was John Newton. John Newton wrote the hymn Amazing Grace, and he had been a slave trader. And he got saved, Now, you need to know, when he got saved, just so there's grace, okay? When he got saved, he didn't leave slave trading right away, okay? There are many people that they're saved, but their theology has not caught up with the Jesus who came to live in their heart. But eventually, it didn't take long, John Newton understood the slave trade is from the pit of hell. And not only must I leave the slave trade, I must now crusade against the slave trade. So when Wilberforce gets saved and comes to talk to John Newton, I won't tell you why, but he comes to talk to him basically to say, I've been born again, I've become a Christian, I'm serious about my faith, so I guess I have to leave politics, right? John Newton says, no. Who knows but that the Lord has raised you up for such a time as this in politics. John Newton didn't have the foolish idea that faith should be separate from politics. We are to bring our faith into every single sphere there is. There is no sphere. There is no part of life where you say, well, my faith that doesn't go there. When you say my faith stays in this little religious corner, you are serving the devil. And we need to be very clear that this apostasy, that this bad theology has crept into the American church. It's always been there. So Wilberforce says, well, I've got to leave politics. Now I'm born again. I've got to go into ministry. And we have this moment, praise the Lord, that John Newton says, no, you stay in politics. You take Jesus into Parliament. You take Jesus into politics, and you use politics for God's purposes. But there were fools in that day, and there have been fools ever since saying, no, we don't mix politics and faith. Well, I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, praise God that William Wilberforce listened to the truth and said, I am going to use politics for God's purposes. That is my ministry, to do good with the platform God has given me. When Bonhoeffer was a young man and Hitler was rising to power, he had an experience in New York City, actually, where I'm from. In case I don't remember if I mentioned that, I'm from New York City with my wife and daughter live there. And Bonhoeffer had an experience in the black church in New York City. And the reason I say that is because already in 1930, when he came to New York, the mainline Protestant churches, think of this, the mainline Protestant churches, the big churches where everybody goes to church, they were already dead. That is 90 years ago, folks. He saw the gospel wasn't preached. It was just people going to get dressed up and to play church. It was a cultural thing. But when he went to the black church, to Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, he said, these people are not playing church. They are the church. They are on fire for God's purposes. They understand that church is not what you do on Sunday morning. Church is what you do 24/7. You are the church of Jesus Christ. And they lived out their faith, and they were politically active. When there was lynchings going on in the South, they talked about it. They would put a black flag hanging out the church because they said, we are here to speak about everything. Not just some thin theology that we're allowed to speak about, because our theology affects everything. It affects how we live, how we treat our neighbors, how we view life, how we treat the poor. It affects everything. And so Bonhoeffer sees this, and he goes back to Germany, and then, of course, he sees the rise of Hitler, and he realizes, as a Christian, I have to speak against this. But he confronted this lie, this heresy, in the German church, where many of the pastors said, well, we don't do that. We just preach the gospel. And he thought, well, you just preach the gospel? Satan has taken control of the German state. It's not the Kaiser who's friendly to the church. It is now Adolf Hitler. And the Nazis, if you pay any attention to their ideology, they are deeply atheistic. And when somebody says they're atheistic, it doesn't mean they're neutral. It means they are at war with God, and they are at war with God's people, and they will crush the church if the church does not speak up. And so in Germany, Bonhoeffer was trying to wake up the German church and to say, the church has a job to be the conscience of the state and to speak out against evil, not just to stick to our little theology, but to take that theology into every sphere. And we see that the National Socialists, now it's very easy for us today to think, oh, the Nazis, I would have seen that. No. Many good Christians didn't see it. They didn't connect the dots. And Bonhoeffer was like a prophet of God trying to wake them up and to make them understand that the ideology of the Nazis is anti-everything biblical. Totally anti-freedom, for sure. Anti-church, anti-life. It is an atheistic, satanic ideology at war with all of God's purposes. And Bonhoeffer knew that human beings are going to suffer as a result of this ideology. And if the church does not speak up, the Lord is going to hold the church responsible, because it is the church's job to speak up. But the excuse given by so many German pastors was, no, we don't get political. We don't do anything divisive. We just want to preach the gospel. Romans 13. They would always say Romans 13. It's very clear. Luther was huge on Romans 13. And if you're a German Lutheran, whatever Luther said goes. He over-focused on Romans 13, which says we're supposed to listen to the state and so on and so forth. It was over-interpreted to mean we don't get political. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just here to tell you, we don't have an option of not getting political. That is just sophistry that the devil uses to shut you up and to shut down the voice of God and to shut down God's purposes. We are to use every tool we have, and certainly any political tools we have. How many people here, think the civil rights movement was a good thing? Most of us say, oh, yeah. Oh, of course, that was a good thing. Well, yeah, it was a good thing. It was birthed in the churches. But let's be clear, it was a political movement. They knew we need to enact laws. This is not just about the culture. We need to enact laws, and we need to repeal unjust laws. So the civil rights movement, which was birthed in the churches, and which we all today know was a good thing, was godly, was political. The only one who wants to tell you, don't be political, or politics is bad, or that's out of bounds, are people who disagree with your politics. People who love the idea of killing the unborn. Of course, today we're in a war that's dramatically similar. It's different, but similar to what Bonhoeffer was facing. Bonhoeffer was trying to wake up the church to stand against National Socialism, right? And National Socialism was an atheistic ideology, totally at war with God, but of course, it would never declare itself as such, right? Satan is not stupid. He doesn't say, follow me, I'm Satan, I'm evil, I'm against you. He pretends, he's an angel of light, pretends to be for whatever you're for, right? So the Nazis, just like, the Soviet Union, just like the communist Chinese today, they talk that they're for the people. Of course they're going to say that. So the Nazis talked a good game. They did not speak openly against the churches. They were very careful about that. Now, why were they careful about that? They were careful about that because the situation in Germany is dramatically similar to the situation in America today. The Church of Jesus Christ in Germany was an unbelievably powerful, probably the most powerful cultural force in the nation. So the goal of those who are at war with the church, they're not stupid. They don't want to alert the church that we're at war with God and we're at war with God's purposes. They want to keep you sleeping. It's like, just don't get too activated. Just don't get too involved. Don't be too political. Just take it easy. Everything is going to be fine. Well, that is exactly what Bonhoeffer was trying to wake the church up about in Germany. He was saying it's not going to be fine. And if you don't stand up, you church, now, they are going to crush us. They are at war with us. They're not stupid enough to declare it. And I think of it kind of like Gulliver being tied down by the Lilliputians, okay? Gulliver was being tied down by the tiny, tiny Lilliputians, and if he had woken up at any point, he would have been able to crush them. But if he would just continue to sleep while they did this business of tying him down, so that by the time he did wake up, it was too late. That is the church in Germany. That is the church in the United States today. As long as we continue, amen. If you don't wake up in time, it's game over. So Bonhoeffer was trying desperately to wake up the German church because he knew, and Hitler knew, the good guys and the bad guys know, God knows, the devil knows, that if the church is awake and if the church is being the church, evil doesn't stand a chance. Satanic evil does not stand a chance if the church of Jesus Christ is awake. But if the church continues to sleep, if we can keep it sleeping a little longer and a little longer. So Bonhoeffer was in this war with time. He was in a battle with time. He understood that every day that passed, that the church did not arouse itself to be militantly against the Nazis, every day that passed, the Nazis gained more power. Just as the Lilliputians, just another rope around Goliath's hand, another rope. Just keep sleeping, keep sleeping. So Bonhoeffer understood that the church has an opportunity to stand, and if it doesn't do it in time, it's game over. Now, I have to give you a statistic. The whole thing came to a kind of a trigger point very early on with the Nazis, when the Nazis, as we understand, they saw everything along racial lines. So Jewish bad, German good, right? So they start instituting these laws in German society, and they basically said, if you're Jewish, you can't be part of the German state. You have to be pure Aryan, pure German, and so on and so forth. And that included the church. They said, yes, we want to have a German church. We've always had a state church, a Reichskirche, and it needs to be pure German, along German lines, along racial lines, no Jews allowed. Now, there were many, 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 many Jews in Germany who believed in Jesus as Savior. There were many in the ministry. And so Bonhoeffer immediately said, we have a problem here. In the church, we talk about faith. If you believe Jesus is Lord, it doesn't matter if you're Irish or German or Jewish. God doesn't really care about that. He cares about whether you believe in Him and worship Him. And the Nazis had a different ideology. So basically, Bonhoeffer and a number of others drafted something called the Barmen Declaration, where they basically said the church in Germany will not bow to the state. The church in Germany bows to Jesus Christ alone, and we will not bow to the state. Now, when the state is being very, very friendly to you, you don't have to do things like draft Barmen declarations. But when you're living in a time like they were then and we are now, when the government is dramatically hostile to God and God's purposes and God's people and God's values, you have to take a stand. You have to understand, now is the time to choose. Now you must choose. So Bonhoeffer, they draft the Barmen Declaration, and there were about 18,000 Lutheran pastors in Germany at that time. So this starts in 1933. The pressure put on people in Germany, exactly like what we're seeing today, the cancel culture. If you get out of line, we're going to come after you. The IRS, the FBI, whoever it is, your friends on Facebook, whatever pressure we can put to shut you up. We don't want to hear about anything controversial. So you think of the most controversial thing, right? What can we say? I want to talk about the vaccine. Oh, you can't talk about that. Now, I know there's difference of opinion on that in this room, but I'm here to tell you, when somebody tells you can't talk about something, you got to understand that's a problem. Because in America, we're allowed to talk about anything we want to talk about. You cannot tell me that I can't talk about it. If I believe the election was stolen, okay, well, you might think I'm wrong. Well, I'm here to tell you, it's okay. Let's talk about it. But if people tell you, you dare not speak about that or that or that, you cannot say, crazy stuff like, a man can't become a woman, right? I can't say that. When people start telling you what you can and can't say, you know you have a problem. And this is what Bonhoeffer began to see in Germany, was this unbelievable pressure that if you don't check the box on all the Nazi ideologies, you're going to get in trouble. You might get sent to a concentration camp. Tremendous pressure was put. And the church, as today, buckled. The church flinched. So about 18,000 pastors were in Germany. In the beginning, in 1933, about 6,000 of them signed the Barmen Declaration. But over 2 years of pressure in the culture from the government, by the time you get to 1935, which is probably where we are now in America, in a parallel, roughly, half of them had dropped away. So you had 3,000 pastors standing bravely and strongly against the Nazis at a time when that was very difficult. Standing bravely. On the other end of the spectrum, you had 3,000 Raphael Warnock type pastors. Am I allowed to say that in Atlanta? Tough luck. I don't care. You had people in Germany, and look, these churches always exist, folks. They don't believe in anything. They're just going along for the ride. They believe whatever. They're hanging out rainbow flags. They're basically preaching whatever the anti-gospel is inside a church, wearing collars, okay? But I'm here to tell you, in Germany, of the 18,000, there are 3,000 heroes. There were 3,000 totally pro-Hitler churches, okay? 3,000. Now, this brings us to do the math. 3,000 heroes standing bravely, speaking on all these cultural issues, knowing we could get in big trouble for this, we might die for this. Many of them did. On the other end of the spectrum, 3,000 apostate churches, openly apostate churches. In the middle, 12,000 churches, 12,000 Lutheran pastors who said, we're not going to decide. We're going to take the third option. We're going to take the safe religious option where we don't do politics. Brothers and sisters, it's because of those 12,000 pastors that satanic evil took over Germany and millions were murdered. It's not because of the 3,000 crazy pro-Hitler pastors. It's because of the 12,000 that said, we think we have a great idea. We've got a great option. We're not going to be political. We're not going to take sides. We're not going to risk our necks standing against Hitler, but praise the Lord, Romans 13, we don't need to do that. We're just going to preach our little gospel. You'll let us do that, won't you, Mr. Fuhrer? Would that be okay with you? That kind of church you have in China today. If you go to China, right? If you're a real Christian, you got big problems with the government, the communist, satanic, atheist government in China. But if you want to play ball with the satanic, communist Chinese who murder people for their organs, if you want to play ball with them, you can just go to one of the official churches that they approve of. You go to one of those official churches and you just preach your little gospel and do your little weird little Christian rituals on Sunday morning. And when you leave that building, you bow to the secular authority of the state. Now, if you think that's the real church, you're mistaken. And the people who go to those churches, and there are many of those churches around America today, that, well, we're going to bow to the secular authorities on whatever they tell us to bow to, on the issue of the unborn, on the issue of trans madness. At this point, it's practically trans terrorism. It's horrifying stuff that's being pushed on our children. If you bow to those things, how can you look in the mirror, much less face a holy God? We are obliged, when we say we're Christians, to speak the truth without fear. And so Bonhoeffer could see that these 12,000 pastors in the middle, they're the problem. And I have to wake up some of them, not all 12,000. But if I could wake up half of that, if I could wake up a third, a fourth of that, we would have the power as the Church of Jesus Christ to stand against Hitler. They had the cultural power, and the Nazis knew it. And the Nazis said, if we can only bully them into silence, if we can only keep them sleeping 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes, eventually it will be too late for them to do anything. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the parallel to the church in the United States today, we've had it pretty good over here in the United States of America. And what happens when you have it good is that you become inured to the concept of evil. You worship a God who's kind of like an add-on, right? You don't really need him to save you from evil and death and hell. You just want him to kind of make your life 30% better. Well, that's not who Jesus is. He died on the cross to save us from death and hell and satanic evil. But if you live in a culture that doesn't see much satanic evil, where we've kind of evolved past evil, we don't have a lot of death, we're doing pretty fine. You lose sight of who God is and what he's called his church to do and to be. And you begin to bow to the secular authority of the state. I mean, it began in 1954. I mean, this is all in my book, Letter to the American Church, but it began in 1954 when Lyndon Johnson, one of the most corrupt politicians who ever lived, in case you're taking notes, Lyndon Johnson instituted as a senator a new IRS law that if you spoke politically from a pulpit, you could lose your IRS status, your tax-exempt status. At that moment, the church should have risen and said, "How dare you, servant of the people, how dare you, when patriots have died for freedom, to tell us what we can say anywhere, much less from our pulpits." That is an idea that is out of hell. But when that happened, many Americans, we suffer kind of from the sin of wanting to be liked, right? We were like, oh, well, okay, we'll go along with that. Sure, that sounds fair. Folks, that was as un-American as anything that's ever happened. But we let it happen. And the church has, over the decades, internalized this idea like, well, we don't do politics. We just preach the gospel. I want to ask you, in this day and age, what kind of dead, thin-lipped gospel are you preaching from your little church if you are not speaking out on every one of the issues that everyone in America, Christians and non-Christians alike, realize are right in our faces today? One of the most important is why we're here tonight. Life, the unborn. Do you think you can avoid politics if you believe that a human being is made in the image of God and we do not have the right to take that life? You think you can avoid politics? Are you the kind of person who says, well, I wouldn't say that from my pulpit because I don't want to lose my 501c3 tax-exempt status? You've become useless if you're afraid to speak the truth. You are no longer doing anything if you're playing that game. And I say this because I know there are many good men preaching the gospel, getting this wrong today. Getting this wrong, who need to be persuaded. And people say, Eric, what can I do? What can I do? Well, you can give my book to your pastor and say, I'd like to talk to you about this in 2 weeks. Let's have a conversation. And if you are going to a church that is not willing to speak out on all of these issues, especially this issue, the issue of the unborn, if you're going to a church that is avoiding that, you need to get out of that church. And the reason I say that is because we are in a war of good versus evil. It's not we will be in a war, and I'm keeping my powder dry for when we get into the war. We are in the war. You will either use your powder and your bullets now, or it will be confiscated from you in 5 minutes. You will lose, and it will be taken from you. Whatever you have, your freedom, your money, you need to use it now for God's purposes, not tomorrow, now. There is nothing easier, by the way, than writing a check. So that's where you start. I want to be honest, folks. If you knew that tomorrow you will not have the ability to write a check to this center, if you knew a week from now you would not have the ability to vote, if you knew a month from now whatever money you have you will not have, how would you act now? What would you do now? Would you give your money to God's purposes, to the purposes of American freedom now? Because I'm telling you, if you don't do it now, where we are in the timeline, it's not, in case you weren't aware, Tip O'Neill is not the face of the Democratic Party. Did you know that? Because there are a lot of people that think like, well, yeah, the pendulum swings back and forth. It swings back and forth. We'll be fine. I don't need to be so political. I'm a Christian, but I don't need to go there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are 3 decades past crossing the Rubicon on these issues. This morning on my radio program, I interviewed Randall Terry. Some of you know him. You want to talk about a hero in the pro-life movement? You want to talk about a man who sacrificed everything, who was arrested 50 times, and if it weren't for him, I'll bet you almost none of us would be here awake to this fight right now. It was because of that man. He told me this morning on my radio program the story. He said he founded Operation Rescue in 1987, 88. In 1994, Bill Clinton's Attorney General, Janet Reno, her number one priority was to shut him down. And they threw everything at him and basically bankrupted him, did everything they could. And when I heard that story this morning, I just thought, you know what? I wasn't awake to that in 1994. Why would a Democratic administration go to war against a man living out his faith, living out his conscience to do what clearly is a biblical mandate? We are in deep waters, folks. The time has changed. Times have changed. That was 1994. Can you imagine that that's almost 30 years ago, and you still have people thinking, I don't want to be political. Oh, I have friends on both sides. Listen, folks, I am all for speaking the truth in love, but if you shrink from speaking the truth, you do not understand where you are now. You do not understand that we are in a war where God is looking to you, to every one of us who dares to say, I am a Christian. If you dare to say, I'm a Christian, you are to live fearlessly. You are to live self-sacrificially. You're not to fear death because you claim to believe Jesus defeated death on the cross. Do you know that he did? Do you know that that's not something you hope is true? If you hope that's true, that's not really where you need to be. You need to know that it's true. Bonhoeffer knew that it was true. The Church of Jesus Christ should be on the offense. We should be playing offense. We're in a war, and if the church understands the time in which we live now, we will rise as one. If we rise as one and speak out against all of the lunacy that is happening, God will be with us. But if we do what the German church did and say, not yet, we're not ready, not yet, because we're actually afraid, because we don't really trust God with our congregation, with our jobs, the Lord will judge us for that. He expects us to trust him with everything. He expects us to trust him with everything. And if we don't, he's not fooled when we say, well, I'm taking a safe, diplomatic, religious path, a middle path. God is not fooled. The devil is definitely not fooled. He rejoices when you take the safe, religious path because he knows it is useless. And when the German church did that, the reason I wrote Letter to the American Church is like the results are very clear to us today. What happened in Germany was hell was unleashed on Europe because of the failure of good Christians in Germany. And I say good Christians. We're talking about the real Christians who just weren't galvanized to do anything until it was too late. And when it was too late, they realized, oh, I have no voice. Oh, I can't do anything now. They all wished ardently at that moment that they had spoken up 3 years earlier, but it was too late. That is where we are today. The Church of Jesus Christ has to arise as one, and we have to speak the truth on every single issue. On the issue of the unborn, the cultural narrative, folks, many people here know the story. You know the story, okay? The truth on this issue, you'll never hear it in the media. Well, did Oprah ever have women on to talk about the agony of their lives after they had an abortion, the pain that they walked with? Did she ever do a show on that? How many things that are true will you never hear in the mainstream media? Church, it is our job to shout these truths, to shout the truth that Planned Parenthood is interested in money and not women. And they claim to be interested in women the way Stalin claimed to be interested in the Russian people. People say a lot of things. We need to call them out. The Lord of hosts is real. He's not just someone we worship kind of in our religious time. That's the God we believe in. He is real. His word is true. And everything he tells us in his word is true. And we have an obligation before God as the church to speak these things because the Lord cares about everyone. He cares about those people who aren't in this room, who maybe don't go to church. They are suffering because the church is not being the church. They are suffering, they're making bad decisions, they're having abortions, they're having sex outside of marriage because nobody made it clear to them what God's beautiful purpose was for them and their bodies and their lives. People have not made that clear, and we have a culture that is preaching lies on all of these issues. The madness that there are people in our day and age saying a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man. The level of preposterousness, I never thought I could live to see this madness with gigantic dudes swimming in pools, claiming to be girls. And you think, okay, it's one thing for one person to be crazy. We need to pray for these people. These people need healing. These people need help. But what are we doing instead? We are basically trying to affirm them in their madness because we don't have the courage to speak the truth. Now, again, I don't expect the world to get this, but I'll tell you what, a lot of the world is getting this stuff, and they're a step ahead of the church. The Lord will use people outside the church to shame the church. And he says, if I need to find pagans who understand common sense, who understand 2 + 2 = 4, men cannot become women, 2 men cannot have a child. If I need to use non-believers to shame the church, I will do that. And he is doing that today. And I interview many of them on my radio program. But again, folks, the parallels to Germany, what makes them chilling is that we don't have the excuse that the German church had. They really and truly believed it would all work out. It would all work out. If they were just diplomatic and sweet and didn't speak up, they thought it would work out. We know what happened. Now, if you think that the German people or the German church, they're outliers, they're uniquely evil, well, then you're a racist. Because the German people are just like any people who have ever lived, and they are dramatically similar culturally to where we are in America today. They believed they were doing the right thing. So the question is, in a country like ours that has had an official separation of church and state, and that has had a dramatically powerful church in our history, we have no excuse. And I wrote this book because, let me be blunt, is I know the Lord called me to write this book. And if you know me, you know I don't say stuff like that lightly. I hate it when Christians kind of say these Christian-sounding things, and it's just emotion, or it's just a little hyperbole. I know the Lord called me to write this book. And if the Lord called me to write this book, it's because he has a will that we would hear his voice, and that we would hear his voice through his prophet Bonhoeffer today. Even though his church in Germany did not hear the prophetic voice of Bonhoeffer in their day, it's the Lord's will that we would know that story and know that unless we do what the Christians did not do in that day, what we will unleash, and we see the judgment already. The Lord in his mercy allows us to see the evil to wake us up. We cannot imagine what the globalist, atheistic elites have planned for us. Believe me, it will be worse than what Hitler planned. And it will fall on us. We will be guilty because we claim to believe in the Lord of hosts and in his Son, Jesus Christ. We have no excuse. If we do not stand as one now, knowing there is no tomorrow, we will lose the battle and tomorrow will be too late. Now, I will say it again, the easiest thing to do, folks, of all the things that God calls on us to do, is to write a check. And I want you to live your faith out in what you do with your money tonight. And I promise you, there is no tomorrow. If you do not, by God's grace, live out your faith now, and again, now I'm just talking about the check you write for this extraordinary cause, okay? First Care Women's Center is not just some little thing. This is not the art league, okay? This is the front line. And when you hear these testimonies, you say, this is what God has done in this area for his purposes. But this is the beginning, folks. This is the beginning that if the church will be the church, if the church will do today in America what it failed to do in Germany, we will see victory. We will see revival. We will see a shift of the cultural narrative so that 10 years from now, people will know that when a woman gets an abortion, she almost always suffers unbelievably. The world needs to know the truth about that. The world needs to know the truth of when somebody is so confused that they take drugs and have surgery to transition to the other sex, that on the other side of that, they're going to suffer. If the church speaks up now, if the church speaks and acts self-sacrificially, if the church spends its money self-sacrificially, knowing that the Lord gave you every dime you have and every bit of freedom you have in America today to use it for his purposes now, if you do that, you will see things you never dreamt of by his grace. Hallelujah. God bless you.
I'm Marquita Shines. I visited the Women's Center to have a pregnancy test done, and it came back that I was pregnant. So I had a counseling session with a lady named Danny, and she told me her story. And I initially was considering having an abortion. It was during the time that it was COVID, and I got really, really sick. And I was in the hospital. Reliving it is a lot. I spent some time in the hospital because at that time during COVID, nobody knew like what would happen. So nobody knew if the baby would survive. And I literally had no connection to my daughter. None. Like I was pregnant with the child and I had no connection. I didn't feel anything for her. And throughout the pregnancy, Miss Danny would reach out to me often to call to check up. And I would always be okay. Even when I wasn't, I would just be like, I'm okay, I'm fine, I don't need anything. I wouldn't accept anything. And like I said, often I would get gift cards in the mail or something from the center and just telling me that if I need them, you know, that they're here. But even not knowing what I was going to do at the time, whether I was going to give birth to the baby and have an adoption agency, or if I was going to care for the baby myself, I always knew that whatever my decision would be, either way, I could go back to the center with these ladies that were willing to help me. Sometimes when you're back against the wall, the wrong choice seems right. I'm glad that I made the right decision with the center behind me. It wasn't just me alone. Even just knowing that you have somewhere to go and somebody to talk to with whatever it is, I think that makes a big difference too. So, yeah, at the end of the tunnel, there's that light. So make the right decision. My daughter right now is 2 years old, Kaylin Serenity. I probably should have named her Joy because every day, every moment when I look at her is like joy. when I'm upset, it doesn't matter what's going on. It's like she brings so much joy to my life, and I'm very excited. I'm just so grateful.
Immediately following the event here, I'm going to be taking him back to the corner over there, so have an opportunity to come and voice your appreciation firsthand. I will be rushing him over, so if I look angry, I'm just trying to scare you, so you get out of my way. The middle of the table now, for you table hosts, now is the time where you have this envelope that says, please do not open. Open it now. Because now is the time to write the checks. If you did not know you were invited to a fundraiser, I apologize. There is a cost. And here it comes. This is your opportunity to support a powerful ministry. God is doing mighty things through this work. So as we open up this envelope, each person at your table should have one of these cards and a lovely little pen for you to do your work with here. You have the opportunity to give a one-time gift tonight, and we have helpfully given you up to $10,000 square if you wish to mark off. If any of you is sitting there thinking, I wanted to do more, but there is not a square for that, there you go, under other. Just write it in, as large as the Lord is moving you to give tonight. Also, monthly pledges. I can tell you that there is nothing that empowers a ministry to work proactively towards its mission like monthly pledges. So if you're considering giving of yourself a little bit every month, understand that by doing that, by writing us into the monthly budget, you empower the ministry to act proactively, to serve the mission proactively. So look through this card, consider your gift, and then put it in the envelope and pass the card back to your table host, who will put it back in the envelope for collection later. As you're prayerfully considering what you can do tonight, I want to add a couple of brief affirmations to what we heard our speaker say tonight. In my years of speaking, a couple of years ago, I was at NC State. I used to be able to tell people after I got done speaking and I did Q&As, I could tell you the list of things that people were going to ask me, and I could tell you the order that they were probably going to ask me those questions in. I got a question for the first time ever at NC State a couple of years ago. A young man very angrily stood up and said, "What makes you think you're allowed to come here and say these things?" And when he said that, I looked at him and I said, well, number one, I was invited by this student group to come and speak, and it was approved by the university, and so that's why I'm here. So the other short answer to your question is because we live in the United States of America, and I don't have to ask you or anybody else for permission to speak about things that are morally important to me, so don't wait for that to happen. Friends of mine who are out there right now who are taking this thing on head on as far as in conversations and dialogue tell me that they're hearing more and more people say, what makes you think you have the right to say these things, to support this position publicly, to come to this place and say the things about human life that you're saying. And when they say the First Amendment and freedom of speech, more and more you hear people respond, well, we'll take care of that. When you consider the gift that you're giving tonight, I do want you to consider what's being said, that you are in a war, that we are in a war. And as we seek to serve the cause of Christ in our community, there are forces that are actively trying to shut us down. We must meet resistance with strength. And God has given us an organization and a ministry in our community that is already doing wonderful things. So take time, take a moment to fill out your gifts. As you fill out your gifts, I will tell you another great sign, another sign that God loves this ministry is the miracle that we're going to finish on time tonight. So I want to invite Pastor Tim Locke from East Cobb Presbyterian Church to come up and to pray us out.
So, Eric, I have to tell you that when you were introduced and it was said that you were on VeggieTales, I have spent half this time trying to figure out which character. And then my wife had to tell me he wrote for VeggieTales. The narrator on the Esther video. I'll have to go back and rewatch that in my spare time. Thank you, brother, for that wonderful challenge and those words of encouragement. As we close, Scripture says, Paul speaking to the Ephesian church, "Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations forever and ever." He is doing amazing things, and as we have been challenged tonight, wants to use us with his immense power. But that is not what the Apostle Paul is praying for in the text. He is praying that Christ will dwell in your hearts by faith. And I, as a minister of the gospel, would invite you to know the surpassing beauty and power of Jesus Christ to rescue you and welcome you into his family. And then he prays that we would be rooted in the love of God for his Son, Jesus Christ. That is the power that God has for us. It is the power he has for the people that this organization and all our churches minister to bring us into faith and his family, and to fill us with the love of Christ. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the power that you are demonstrating in our churches to bring brothers and sisters into your family. We rejoice in the power that you are demonstrating in rescuing people, children, infants, from a culture of death. We rejoice in the power that you are demonstrating to transform lives. And we know and always have known that you have the power to change laws. We depend on that power to empower us, to save lives, to embolden believers, to expand your family, to bring revival, to change our nation and the world. Give us that power. Send your Spirit, your powerful, life-changing Spirit. And may he work his glorious work in our churches, in our communities, in our nation, and in our world. For the glory of our Savior, who alone is worthy, we pray. Amen. God bless you. Go in peace.